Omega hid in an abandoned cave to avoid marking until the Alpha King found her. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Evelyn Blackwood had always known that her life was meant to be different. Her pack had rejected her, not because of her appearance, but because of something far more profound, her inability to shift. The absence of her wolf made her an outcast, a failure in the eyes of her pack, and she had never once experienced the connection that most Omegas spoke of with their alpha. So, she had no choice but to leave, to escape from the judgment and the whispers that followed her wherever she went. She found solace in the wilderness, in the silence of the abandoned cave where she hid away from the world. The cave, nestled deep in the forest, was her sanctuary. No one could find her here, at least, that's what she thought. The outside world was dangerous, but it was nothing compared to the pain that came from being so close to her pack and yet so far from acceptance. Evelyn spent her days collecting herbs and water, living off the land in peace, or so she believed. But there was always a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, a strange tug in the back of her mind, like someone was calling her. She tried to ignore it at first, but the feeling only grew stronger as the days passed. The forest around her was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds, but there was something else, something unsettling, lurking in the shadows. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the air shifted. Evelyn felt a presence nearby, a heavy, powerful energy that made her heart race. She wasn't alone anymore. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but her legs felt rooted to the ground, her breath shallow and fast. She couldn't explain why she felt so drawn to this presence, nor why her heart seemed to beat in time with it. And then, as if her world had shifted on its axis, a figure emerged from the trees. The Alpha King, Caden Thornridge, stood before her, tall and imposing. His gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that made her chest tighten. His eyes, a piercing silver, seemed to see right through her, to the very core of her being. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She had heard the stories of the Alpha King, the ruthless ruler who commanded the entire northern territories with his iron will. No one could stand against him. Yet here he was, standing in front of her, as if he had been looking for her all along. "I found you." Caden's voice was deep and commanding, yet there was a softness to it that caught Evelyn off guard. She tried to step back, her legs unsteady, but he moved closer, his presence overwhelming. Evelyn's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. How could this be happening? How could the Alpha King, the most feared and powerful man in the land, have found her, of all people? She had hidden herself away from the world, from everyone. But now, she was face to face with the one person she never thought she would meet. Caden took another step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. Evelyn could feel the weight of his stare, the pressure of his dominance, but she didn't feel fear. Instead, there was a strange warmth, a pull toward him that she couldn't explain. "You've been hiding from me," he said, his voice softer now, as though he understood her fear. "But you can't hide forever, Evelyn. You and I are destined to meet. You've always known it." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. How did he know her name? How did he know about her? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her mind was spinning, her thoughts jumbled and chaotic. All she could do was stare at the man standing before her, the Alpha King who had somehow found her in this forgotten corner of the world. The Alpha King's presence felt like a weight pressing down on Evelyn's chest. She stood frozen, unable to move as he slowly approached her, his steps measured but full of purpose. His silver eyes, which gleamed with an intensity she could not ignore, seemed to pierce through her, reading every part of her soul. She wanted to run, to hide in the depths of the cave, but something in his gaze kept her rooted to the spot. His power radiated from him like a tangible force, and Evelyn could feel it in her very bones. She had never met someone like him before. He was no ordinary alpha. Caden Thornridge, the Alpha King, was a force of nature, and somehow, he had found her. The moment their eyes met, she knew there was no escaping what fate had in store. "You've been hiding from me for far too long, Evelyn." Caden's voice was deep, like a rumble of thunder that echoed in the stillness of the cave. His words sent a shiver down her spine, not out of fear, but something deeper, something she couldn't explain. The connection between them was undeniable. Evelyn felt it, the strange pull that seemed to draw her toward him, no matter how much she tried to resist it. "I never wanted to be found," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible, but Caden heard it clearly. He took another step closer, his presence enveloping her completely. "And yet, here we are," he replied, his gaze softening just slightly. "It was never about wanting to be found, Evelyn. It was always about destiny." Evelyn's heart raced as she struggled to understand what he meant. Her life had been nothing but a series of rejections and betrayals. She had never asked for any of this. She had never asked to be marked, to be tied to someone else by fate. But now, with Caden standing before her, it was as if the universe had already made its decision. Her heart beat erratically in her chest, the weight of his words sinking in. She felt something stir inside her, a strange feeling of recognition, as if she had always known this moment would come. She had always feared it, but now that it was here, there was no denying the pull between them. Caden's eyes never left hers as he reached out, his hand brushing gently against her cheek. His touch was warm, and it sent a wave of warmth through Evelyn's body, spreading from her face to the tips of her fingers. It was both comforting and unsettling at the same time. She had spent so many years alone, so many years hiding from the world and from her own fears. But now, here he was, the one person who seemed to understand her, the one person who knew the truth about her. "You don't have to be afraid," Caden said softly, his voice filled with a tenderness Evelyn had not expected. "I won't hurt you." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel his touch. She wanted to believe him, but the fears still lingered. What did this all mean? Why had he come for her? And most importantly, what would happen if she allowed herself to fall into this fate that had been written for her? The answers seemed just out of reach, and yet, a part of her knew that she would never be the same after this moment. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage to open her eyes and look at him once more. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice steady now, though her heart still pounded in her chest. Caden's gaze softened, and for a moment, Evelyn thought she saw something other than power and dominance in his eyes, something vulnerable. "Because you're mine, Evelyn," he said, his words heavy with finality. "And I'm not letting you go." The weight of his declaration hung in the air, settling between them like a promise, like a truth that could no longer be denied. Evelyn stood still, unable to move as Caden stepped closer. She felt the warmth of his body radiate toward her, the heat of his presence drawing her in like a magnetic force. She wanted to pull away, to run, but deep down, she knew that she couldn't. This was her fate. And whether she was ready for it or not, Caden Thornridge, the Alpha King, had come for her. Evelyn stood motionless, her heart hammering in her chest as Caden's words echoed in her mind. "You're mine, Evelyn," he had said. She wanted to protest, to argue, but she found herself unable to speak. The weight of his declaration hung heavily in the air, and for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel the need to hide. She didn't need to run from the truth that had always been lurking in the corners of her mind. It was as if Caden had uncovered the part of her she had longed to ignore, the part that had always known she was meant for something more, something grander than the small life she had chosen in her hidden cave. Caden's presence was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. She felt drawn to him, not because of his power or his title, but because of something deeper, something neither of them had the words for. It was a connection that surged between them, like an invisible thread linking their souls. Evelyn felt it in every beat of her heart, in every breath she took. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next, but she knew she couldn't fight it any longer. The choice had already been made. Caden was not just the Alpha King, he was the one she had been waiting for. He took another step forward, closing the distance between them, and Evelyn felt a sudden rush of warmth spread through her. His hand gently cupped her face, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. "I know you're afraid," he said softly, his voice a low murmur that sent a shiver down her spine. But you don't have to be. I'm not going to hurt you. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, her eyes searching his for any sign of deceit. But there was none. His eyes were filled with something she hadn't expected, vulnerability. For the first time, he wasn't just the fearsome Alpha King. He was someone who, in this moment, seemed as lost as she was. She swallowed hard, her voice shaky as she found the courage to speak. How can you say that? Her words were barely above a whisper. How can you be sure? You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. Caden's hand remained gentle against her skin, his touch grounding her. I know enough, he said, his thumb brushing lightly over her cheek. I've known you longer than you think, Evelyn. Longer than you've known yourself. There's something about you, something I can't explain. But I can feel it. You're not just any Omega. You're mine, and I'm not going to let you go. His words struck her deeply, not in a way that made her feel overwhelmed, but in a way that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. She had always been the one who hid, one who ran from her destiny, but now, standing in front of this powerful, enigmatic man, she felt as though she had been found. But I don't belong in your world, Evelyn whispered, her eyes cast down, avoiding his piercing gaze. I'm not like the others. I'm weak. I'm broken. Caden's expression softened as he lifted her chin with his fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. You're not weak, Evelyn. You've survived so much more than anyone knows. And that's what makes you strong. You've been running for too long, but now it's time to stop. I won't let you hide anymore. The words settled over Evelyn like a warm blanket, wrapping her in a sense of comfort she hadn't known in years. She wanted to believe him, to trust in his promise, but the fear still lingered. She had spent so long convincing herself that she was alone, that no one could ever accept her for who she truly was. But here he was, the Alpha King, looking at her with nothing but acceptance in his eyes. You don't have to be afraid of me, Caden said, his voice firm yet gentle. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to claim you, to make you mine. And I will do whatever it takes to protect you. Evelyn's heart fluttered at his words, but the doubt still gnawed at her. Could she truly accept this fate? Could she trust him? She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and nodded. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear, her life would never be the same again. And somehow, that was okay. Caden smiled, the corners of his lips lifting slightly as he stepped even closer, his presence almost suffocating in its intensity. Good, he whispered, his voice full of approval. Because I'm not letting you go. Not now, not ever. Evelyn could feel the weight of Caden's presence, his hand still gently holding her chin as he looked into her eyes. For a moment, she wondered if she had made the right choice in letting him so close. She had spent her entire life running from the idea of being claimed, of being bound to someone by fate. But here she was, standing in front of the one person who seemed to see through all her defenses, through all the walls she had carefully built around herself. She had always thought she would be alone forever, a broken Omega hiding from the world. But now, Caden Thornridge, the Alpha King, stood before her, and everything she had believed seemed to crumble. His gaze softened, and she could see the depth of emotion in his eyes. It wasn't just dominance or power, it was something real, something raw, that she hadn't expected. You're afraid, Caden said, his voice quiet, but there was no judgment in it. I can see it. But fear won't control you anymore, Evelyn. I won't let it. Evelyn swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heart. She had always feared this moment, the moment when everything she had worked so hard to protect would be exposed, when she would have to confront her own destiny. What if I'm not ready, she whispered, her voice trembling. What if I'm not strong enough to be the mate of someone like you? Caden stepped closer, his presence comforting yet overwhelming. You've been strong all along, he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Stronger than you know. You've faced rejection, isolation, and yet here you are, standing before me. That's strength, Evelyn. And I'm here to help you find even more of it. Evelyn looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of insincerity, but found none. There was nothing but honesty in his gaze. But I don't know how to be the Omega you need, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can be what you want me to be. Caden's expression softened even further. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are, Evelyn. That's what I need. I don't want a perfect mate. I want you. The woman who has survived everything and still has the courage to stand in front of me now. That's all I need. The words settled into her heart, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel: hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. Maybe she could trust herself. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't facing it alone. I don't know what to say, Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then don't say anything, Caden replied, his voice gentle yet firm. Just let me show you. Before Evelyn could react, Caden reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The contact was electric, a jolt of warmth spreading through her veins, settling deep into her chest. She gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Caden didn't pull away. Instead, he held her hand gently, his touch reassuring and steady. This is just the beginning, Evelyn, he said, his voice low and steady. And no matter what happens, I will be here. You're not alone anymore. Evelyn looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion she didn't quite understand. She had spent so long hiding, so long running from the idea of being tied to someone. But now, with Caden beside her, she realized that maybe being tied to someone wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe it was what she had been searching for all along. And as Caden's hand held hers, she knew one thing for sure: her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. The future was uncertain, but with him by her side, Evelyn felt like she could face anything. She squeezed his hand in return, the connection between them undeniable. I'm ready, she whispered, her voice full of determination. And for the first time, she truly believed it. The days that followed felt like a blur to Evelyn. Her world had shifted so suddenly that she was still trying to grasp the new reality she had found herself in. Caden was by her side every step of the way, but even his steady presence couldn't erase the confusion and the fear that lingered in her mind. She had never imagined that her life would change this drastically. One moment, she was hiding in an abandoned cave, convinced that she would never be anything more than an outcast. And now, here she was, standing at the edge of a destiny she hadn't chosen but felt powerless to avoid. Every time she looked at Caden, she saw something new. There was the king in him, the alpha who commanded respect and had the power to make nations tremble, but there was also the man who had found her when she had tried to hide away from everything. There was kindness in his eyes, something that made her wonder if he truly understood what it was like to feel broken. She had always believed she was destined for nothing, but now, Caden was showing her that maybe she was meant for something more. Evelyn, Caden said one evening as they sat by the fire, his voice quiet but serious. There's something I need to tell you. Evelyn looked at him, her heart beating a little faster. She had learned to trust him, but the weight of his words still sent a ripple of unease through her. What is it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been searching for you for a long time, he continued, his eyes fixed on the flames. I knew you were out there, hiding from your own destiny. And I knew that when the time came, I would find you. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She had always wondered how Caden had found her, how he knew where to look. How did you know? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I could feel it, Caden said, turning to meet her gaze. The connection between us. It's not something that can be ignored. You and I were meant to be together, Evelyn. It's not just fate, it's something more. Evelyn's mind raced. She had always believed that fate was something to be feared, something that controlled her life without her consent. But now, hearing Caden's words, she began to wonder if maybe fate wasn't something to run from, but something to embrace. She had spent so long rejecting the idea of being tied to anyone, especially someone like Caden. But now, she couldn't deny the pull she felt whenever he was near. She had always known something was missing in her life, but now she understood that it had been him all along. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, Evelyn admitted, her voice soft. I've spent so many years alone, hiding from everyone. I don't know how to be the mate of a king. Caden reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to be anything other than yourself, Evelyn," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I didn't come here for a perfect mate. I came here for you. You are enough. You always have been." Evelyn looked at him, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Could it really be that simple? Could she truly accept that she was enough, just as she was? "But I'm still scared," Evelyn admitted, her voice barely audible. "What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough to be with you?" Caden smiled softly, his expression filled with understanding. "You're already stronger than you know, Evelyn. You've already faced more than most people could ever imagine. But you don't have to do it alone. I'm here with you, and I always will be." His words wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and for the first time, Evelyn felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that with Caden by her side, she could face it. Together, they could overcome anything. "I'm ready," Evelyn said, her voice steady with newfound determination. "I'll be by your side, Caden. No matter what comes next." Caden's eyes lit up with warmth and pride as he squeezed her hand. "Then we'll face it together," he said, his voice full of conviction. And in that moment, Evelyn knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't have to face them alone. With Caden by her side, she was ready to embrace the future no matter what it held. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension that Evelyn could not ignore. She had made the decision to stand by Caden's side, but as the hours passed, she found herself second-guessing her choice. Her world had changed so drastically in such a short amount of time, and while Caden was everything she had imagined, strong, determined, and gentle in his own way, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder if she truly belonged in his world. The reality of being the Alpha King's mate was slowly settling in, and with it came the weight of expectations she was unsure she could meet. Despite Caden's reassuring words, Evelyn was filled with uncertainty. She had never been anyone's first choice. Her pack had rejected her for being different, for being a broken Omega. The thought of stepping into a world so full of power and politics made her anxious. She wasn't like the other Omegas who had been born into the system, who knew their place. She was an outcast, someone who had spent her life hiding away, keeping to the shadows. Yet here she was, standing in the heart of the very world she had once feared. It felt like a dream, and not the good kind. "Evelyn," Caden's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to face him. He stood in the doorway of their shared quarters, his silver eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "Come here." His tone was calm, but there was an underlying warmth that made her feel safe despite the chaos swirling inside her. She hesitated for a moment before crossing the room to where he stood. As she approached, Caden reached out, pulling her gently into his arms. The instant she was close to him, Evelyn could feel the tension that had been building inside her melt away. He was a rock, solid and unwavering, and for the first time since arriving at the palace, she felt like she could breathe. "I know this isn't easy for you," Caden said softly, his voice steady and full of understanding. "But you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. And I always will be." Evelyn closed her eyes, her forehead resting against his chest as she tried to steady her racing heart. She had never been this close to anyone before, and the intimacy of the moment made her feel exposed, vulnerable. But she didn't pull away. She didn't want to. "I'm scared," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Scared of not being enough, scared of failing. Caden's arms tightened around her, and she felt the steady beat of his heart against her own. "You're more than enough, Evelyn," he murmured. "You're stronger than you realize, and I'm not going to let you face this alone. You've already come so far, and together, we'll face whatever comes next." Evelyn swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. Caden's words were exactly what she needed to hear. She had spent so many years hiding from the truth of who she was, so many years believing she wasn't worthy of love or acceptance. But standing here in his arms, she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be something more than the broken Omega she had always thought herself to be. "I'm not sure I can be the mate you deserve," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I've never been anyone's first choice. I've always been different." Caden gently lifted her chin, his silver eyes locking onto hers with a look of unwavering conviction. "You are exactly what I've been waiting for," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I don't need a perfect mate. I need you. You're the one I've chosen, and I don't care about anything else." Evelyn felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, embarrassed by the vulnerability she had shown. But Caden only smiled softly, brushing the tear away with his thumb. "You don't have to hide from me," he said. "I'm here for all of you, the good, the bad, the messy parts. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself." For the first time in her life, Evelyn felt like she didn't have to be anything more than who she was. She had always tried to hide her flaws, to be someone else, but in this moment, with Caden's arms around her, she felt like she could finally let go of that fear. "I'm scared, Caden," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to be with you. Even if it scares me." Caden's smile widened, and he leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "That's all I need, Evelyn. You're already stronger than you know." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Evelyn felt the fear that had been holding her back slowly begin to dissipate. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, she felt ready to face it. Together with Caden, she knew they could overcome anything. She was ready to embrace the future, whatever it might bring. And with that thought, Evelyn allowed herself to finally relax, knowing that for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. As the days passed, Evelyn felt the weight of her decision settling in. The comfort of Caden's presence was undeniable, but so was the growing responsibility that came with it. She had never been a part of something so powerful, so all-consuming. Her life had been small, quiet, and isolated, and now, she was thrust into the heart of a kingdom. Caden's world was vast and full of complexities, and she could no longer hide from the reality of who he was. He was not just the Alpha King, he was a symbol of power, of strength, and of authority. His every move was calculated, his every word measured. But even in his powerful presence, Evelyn saw something more. She saw the man who had rescued her, the man who believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Still, as much as Caden's kindness and confidence made her feel safe, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder how long that would last. Would she ever truly fit into this world, or would she always be the outcast, the one who didn't belong? One evening, after a long day spent wandering the gardens of the palace, Evelyn found herself in the quiet of the library. She had spent hours lost in the pages of ancient texts, trying to understand the history of the kingdom, trying to find her place in it. But the more she read, the more she felt like an outsider. She was not a warrior, not a noble, not even a full Omega. She was just Evelyn, a girl who had been thrown into a world she didn't understand. "You've been hiding in here again," Caden's voice broke through her thoughts, and she looked up to see him standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with concern. He had a way of appearing at the right moment, as if he could sense when she needed him most. "I wasn't hiding," Evelyn said, offering him a small smile. "I was just thinking." Caden stepped into the room, his presence filling the space. "You can't keep hiding, Evelyn," he said gently, walking toward her. "You've made your choice. You're here with me now, and that means you're part of this world, whether you're ready for it or not." Evelyn stood and faced him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not sure I belong here," she confessed, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can live up to everything you expect from me." Caden's expression softened as he took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't expect perfection, Evelyn. I expect you to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." Evelyn shook her head, feeling the weight of her insecurities pressing down on her. "But I'm not like the other Omegas," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't shift, I can't fight. I can barely even stand in the presence of the other wolves without feeling small. I don't have the power you do. I don't have what it takes to be your mate." Caden's hand reached out, gently cupping her face. "You don't need to be like the others," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "You don't need to be anything other than who you are. That's why I chose you. You're unique, Evelyn. And that's what makes you strong. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, and she looked down, unable to meet his gaze. I don't know if I can believe that, she whispered. I've spent my whole life believing I was broken, that I wasn't worth anyone's love or attention. Caden lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. You're not broken, Evelyn, he said softly, his voice full of conviction. You've been through more than anyone should ever have to endure. But you're still here. You're still standing. And that makes you stronger than you know. Evelyn felt the warmth of his words sink deep into her heart. She had spent so long hiding from the world, from herself. But here, with Caden, she could see a future where she didn't have to hide, where she could be herself. I want to believe you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But I'm scared. I don't know if I'm strong enough to be everything you need. Caden smiled, a small but genuine smile that made Evelyn's heart flutter. You don't need to be everything, he said softly. You just need to be you. And that's more than enough for me. The sincerity in his words washed over her like a wave, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt something stir inside her, hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could be the person Caden believed her to be. Maybe she didn't have to hide anymore. I'll try, she whispered, her voice steady with resolve. I'll try to be what you see in me. Caden's hand lingered on her cheek, and he leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. That's all I ask, he murmured, his voice full of warmth and understanding. We'll face everything together, Evelyn. You're not alone anymore. And for the first time since she had met him, Evelyn believed him. With Caden by her side, she felt like she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. She didn't have to be perfect, she didn't have to have all the answers. All she had to do was trust him and trust herself. Together, they would face the future, whatever it held. And for the first time, Evelyn felt ready to embrace. With Caden, her future didn't seem so uncertain anymore. Evelyn had always felt like an outsider, someone on the fringes of a world she could never fully belong to. But now, standing beside Caden, the Alpha King, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just the pull of destiny that had drawn her to him, nor was it the power he held over his kingdom. It was something deeper, something that she couldn't quite put into words. She had spent so many years running from herself, from the truth of who she was, but now, with Caden by her side, she was starting to feel like maybe she didn't have to hide anymore. The palace, with its towering walls and grand halls, felt less like a prison and more like a place where she could finally be free. The pressure that had weighed so heavily on her shoulders started to lift, replaced by a new sense of purpose. Caden had shown her that she didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be the warrior or the powerful Omega that everyone expected. She just had to be herself. And that was enough for him. Evelyn spent the days that followed walking beside Caden as he went about his royal duties. He didn't treat her like someone who needed protection, nor did he expect her to be something she wasn't. Instead, he made sure she had a place in his world, a voice that was heard, and a purpose that mattered. It was a far cry from the life she had left behind in the caves, hiding from everyone, including herself. As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn found herself growing more comfortable in her new life. She was no longer the outcast she had once been. She was no longer hiding. She was standing tall, not just by Caden's side, but by her own. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony overlooking the kingdom, Caden took Evelyn's hand in his touch warm and steady. You've come a long way, he said softly, his voice filled with quiet pride. Evelyn looked out over the land, the sprawling fields and distant mountains that marked the borders of Caden's kingdom. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like an outsider. I never imagined I would be here, she said, her voice a whisper. I never imagined I would be standing beside you, let alone be a part of this world. Caden smiled, a small but genuine smile that made Evelyn's heart swell. You were always meant to be here, Evelyn. You just didn't know it yet. And now that you do, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Evelyn turned to face him, her heart beating a little faster. She could feel the weight of his words, the truth in them, and for the first time, she didn't doubt herself. She had spent so long feeling like she didn't belong, like she wasn't worthy of the life she had. But now, with Caden's reassurance, she felt like she could take on anything. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For showing me that I don't have to be afraid anymore. For helping me see that I'm enough just as I am." Caden stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her cheek. "You've always been enough, Evelyn," he said softly. "You've always been more than enough. I just had to remind you of that." As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Evelyn realized that this was where she was meant to be. By Caden's side, yes, but also standing in her own light, strong and unafraid. The future still held uncertainties, but for the first time, she felt like she could face it with confidence. The journey ahead was theirs to take, and with Caden beside her, Evelyn knew that whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. And that thought, more than anything, filled her with peace. She wasn't alone anymore. She had found her place in this world, and she had found a home in Caden's heart. The bond between them, once an unknown force pulling them together, now felt like the strongest thing in her life. And Evelyn knew, with certainty, that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. The weeks that followed were filled with both challenges and moments of unexpected joy. Evelyn had found her place in Caden's world, but the journey was far from over. Every day brought something new, whether it was a royal meeting, an unfamiliar tradition, or the subtle but constant shift in her own heart. But despite everything, Evelyn felt stronger than she had ever been. Caden's unwavering support had given her a newfound sense of confidence. She was no longer just the broken Omega who had been abandoned by her pack. She was Evelyn Blackwood, the mate of the Alpha King, a woman with her own purpose. And as much as she tried to deny it, that purpose was becoming clearer with each passing day. One morning, as the sun's rays filtered through the palace windows, Evelyn sat by the window, watching the kingdom come to life. The distant sounds of the bustling city, the clatter of horses' hooves, and the soft rustling of the trees filled the air. It was a peaceful morning, one that she had come to cherish. But as peaceful as it seemed, Evelyn could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her once again. She was expected to step into a role that was larger than life, a role that she wasn't sure she was ready for. But then, she felt the familiar presence of Caden beside her, his steady presence grounding her in a way that nothing else could. "You're lost in thought again," he said gently, his voice full of understanding. She turned to face him, offering a small smile. "Just thinking about everything," she replied. "About how much has changed." Caden sat beside her, his hand brushing against hers in a gesture of reassurance. "Change is inevitable," he said, his voice filled with the quiet authority that Evelyn had come to admire. "But you're not facing it alone. We're in this together." Evelyn looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had always feared that she would have to face the world on her own, that she would always be the outsider. But now, with Caden by her side, she knew she didn't have to be afraid anymore. "I don't know what I would do without you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Caden smiled softly, his fingers tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "You're never alone, Evelyn," he said. "I'll always be here. No matter what." Those words, simple as they were, filled Evelyn with a warmth she had never known. They didn't just represent Caden's promise, they represented the future she was starting to see for herself. A future where she wasn't just hiding from the world, but standing at the side of the most powerful man in the kingdom, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the days passed, Evelyn found herself stepping more and more into her new role. Caden took her to various events, introducing her to the court and showing her the intricacies of royal life. At first, she felt out of place, like she didn't belong in such an opulent world. But with Caden's guidance, she learned to hold her own, to speak with confidence and grace. Slowly but surely, she began to see that this world wasn't as foreign as she had once thought. And it wasn't just Caden's world, it was hers too. "You're learning fast," Caden remarked one evening as they stood on the balcony, overlooking the city. "Soon, you'll be leading beside me, not behind me." Evelyn laughed softly, the sound light and free. "I'm not sure I'll ever be ready for that," she said. But Caden only smiled, his expression full of pride. "You're already there, Evelyn. I can see it in you. The compliment made her heart flutter, but she wasn't sure if she could ever truly believe it. Still, the thought lingered in her mind, planting a seed of hope. Maybe she could be more than just an Omega. Maybe she could be the Luna that Caden needed, the queen that the kingdom deserved. As the moon rose high above the palace that night, Evelyn stood beside Caden, watching the stars twinkle in the vast expanse of the sky. For the first time in her life, she felt at peace. She wasn't alone anymore. And with Caden by her side, she knew that whatever the future held, she was ready to face it. Together, they would write their own story, a story of love, strength, and destiny. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Evelyn had found her place in this world. And she wasn't going anywhere. Not without Caden. Not without love.